Hi, my name is Duffy Robbins, and hey, thanks for letting me be a part of your group. This is awesome. When it comes to photography, I am an absolute, I know nothing about it. I'm completely ignorant. I think I've maybe in my entire life posted 4 times on Instagram, and I think I got a half a like. The only thing I do in Snapchat, I just use that so I can sort of change my face, funny face stuff, and frankly, my arm is just barely long enough for me to get my entire face into a selfie. I'm not a big photography guy. But I have a friend who is a total photography geek. I mean, he is just totally into it. And not digital photography. I mean, that's for wimps. He's like old school, develop your own pictures, the whole deal. He's got the gear, he's got the lights, he's got those lenses that stick out about 30 feet. I mean, it's just like, oh my gosh, look at this thing. And he even has his own darkroom down in the basement of his house. And so one day he took me down there and showed me this dark room. And I don't know how much you know about photography, but these dark rooms, particularly before the age of digital photography, were an essential part of the process. Because what would happen is you'd take your picture, then you'd take the film, the negatives, and you would take it into this dark place. It had to have minimal light. Typically, they have sort of a dim red light. Had to have minimal light. And then in that space, you would actually dip the negatives into some chemicals that would help the film fully develop. So the way he explained it to me, I'm sure he's simplifying, is it essentially said, well, actually the picture comes from exposure to light. But the vivid color actually comes when it's been through the darkness. And it's funny, when he said that, it made me think about sometimes how we think about our lives. I think most of us, we think that the way to know joy in our lives, the way to bring vivid color to our lives is to actually eliminate the negatives altogether, right? Like get rid of all the bad stuff in our lives. Like our default approach as a culture to eliminate the negatives is to kind of numb ourselves or maybe try to drown out the negatives in our lives or maybe just try to protect ourselves, just kind of withdraw, isolate, protect ourselves from negative stuff or maybe distract ourselves by like being super busy, involved in sports and school and music and popularity and all kinds of things. Like in our culture, it's like our standard approach to happiness, to joy is to, do fun stuff, right? Go to the beach, go to the show, get a big bank account, watch cat videos, go to a movie, go for dinner, and then complete your joy by posting photos on Facebook of your good fortune. And that's kind of the way we do life and do happiness. And I'm not saying anything is like inherently evil, anything, except maybe the cat videos, which I think are pretty much essentially satanic. But what I am saying is this. What God calls us to in the Scripture, what you start to see in Scripture about God's notion of joy, is that actually He calls us to a joy that is deeper and richer and more authentic than what we often think about in our culture as happiness. In other words, what God recognizes is that oftentimes, yes, He gives us moments of light where we get these amazing pictures. But what really brings out the vivid color, what really makes the picture authentic, is when God allows us to experience dark places. One of the amazing facts about Christianity is it doesn't call us to sort of a fairy tale. It doesn't call us to Never Land. It doesn't call us to a place of happiness in light. It calls us in the grit of the real world. If you actually read through the New Testament, one of the kind of quirky observations you'll make about Scripture is how often, when you read through the New Testament, suffering is actually promised to come with a blessing. That when you go through suffering, there's going to be some kind of blessing. When you face the dark times, there's going to be some kind of blessing. And what's interesting is almost every single time in the New Testament, when the blessing is mentioned, the blessing that's promised is the blessing of joy. So So what God actually promises to us is that even in our darkness, he can bring to us the vivid color, the authentic picture of real joy. I don't know what your life is like today. Maybe when you look at the pictures of your life and the snapshots of the week that you've just finished living, maybe you kind of look back and you see all kinds of really happy stuff. But I'm going to guess that for some of us who are watching right now, who are listening, that what you are seeing are some sort of sad pictures, some hard pictures. I read just the other day about a 16-year-old girl, and in her Tumblr feed, she actually had sort of an ongoing journal about her life as living with depression. And one of the interesting statements she made is she said, "I wake up every morning worried that I'm going to live. I wake up every morning worried that I'm going to live." And you could just feel some of the depression and some of the darkness. And it's interesting. If you look at some of the data, some of the statistics, what we're seeing is that more and more of us face struggles with depression, with dark moods, with dark times, with dark feelings. That when we look at the snapshots and the pictures of our life, we don't see a lot of light and a lot of hope and a lot of joy. Well, the great thing about Scripture is that it doesn't tell us to ignore the darkness. It doesn't try to kind of shove the darkness away. It doesn't try to drown it out or distract us from the darkness. What God promises is that yes, he can expose us to his light, but he deepens the color and the authenticity of our life by allowing us to go through those dark experiences. There's actually a passage in the Scriptures written by a guy named Paul. Paul had his share of wonderful pictures and wonderful images in his life of great things happening, but he also faced some really dark times. He faced some times of real despair. And near the end of his life, he wrote some words of encouragement about how he had seen God take him into the dark rooms, the dark places. But in those dark places, what he discovered was new life, new joy, vivid colors and rich colors of happiness. Let me just read you these words from Romans chapter 5. This is in the New Testament. Paul writes, "Through him, through Jesus, we have also obtained access by faith." In other words, we have this by faith, "into a grace in which we stand." And I want you to notice these words. He says, "And we rejoice in hope of the glory of God." Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And I love these last words. And hope does not put us to shame. It doesn't disappoint us, because God's love has been poured into our hearts. I love to laugh. I love those snapshots of light in my life. But I want to say this to you today. If you are experiencing some places of darkness, don't believe for a minute that God is not there. Don't believe for a minute that the best way to deal with it is kind of huff and puff and wish you could blow it away, or be distracted from it, or try to numb yourself from feeling it. Because what you'll discover, if you will, by faith in God, if you'll go into that dark place and listen for him and watch for him, you can begin to experience real, authentic, lasting hope. Don't be afraid of the dark places. That's how God develops us into the color and the image that he's called us to be.